The gavel slammed down like a gunshot, sealing her fate. The crowd erupted into cruel, echoing laughter. For exactly $312, Beatrice Gallagher had just purchased 24 of the most deformed, aggressive, and downright hideous cows in Oregon. She had 2 weeks before bankruptcy, and she had just bet the family farm on monsters. The Tillamook County livestock auction smelled of damp sawdust, stale Folgers coffee, and the metallic tang of desperation. For Beatrice "Bea" Gallagher, it smelled like the end of the line. Sitting in the rusted bleachers, Bea clutched a crumpled bank notice in her calloused hands. Arthur Reynolds at First National had been brutally clear. Oakhaven Dairy was 90 days in arrears. If she didn't double her milk production by the end of the quarter, the bank was foreclosing on the land her grandfather had cleared with his bare hands in 1942. The problem was simple, but impossible to solve. Commercial milk prices had hit rock bottom, and her aging herd of Holsteins was dying out. She needed fresh, high-yielding cattle. She had exactly $4,000 in her checking account. Down in the ring, sleek, beautiful. Holstein heifers were selling for $1,500 to $2,000 a head. They were black and white perfection, bred for one thing: pumping out 10 gallons of watery, standardized milk a day. Bea watched them go, her heart sinking into her muddy boots. She couldn't afford a single one. Then came Lot 42. A collective groan, followed by a ripple of mocking laughter, swept through the auction house as the metal gates clanged open. "All right, folks, settle down," the auctioneer, Hank Mitchell, chuckled into his microphone. "Next up, we got the late Elias Cleary's scrap herd. 24 head of something." Bea leaned forward, squinting through the dust. The animals stumbling into the ring looked like a cruel joke. They were a chaotic mix of forgotten heritage genetics, mostly Randall lineback, mixed with something feral. They had massive, disproportionate heads, scrawny necks, and hips that jutted out like rusty coat racks. Their coats were matted in ugly splotches of brindle, rust, and dirt brown. One of them, a menacing-looking beast with a chipped horn, immediately charged the pen barrier, sending a handler scrambling up the rails. "I wouldn't turn my back on that one," yelled a booming voice from the front row. It was Thomas Higgins. Higgins owned a corporate mega dairy up the road, 5,000 cows, robotic milkers, and a ruthless desire to buy up every small farm in the valley, including Oakhaven. "They look like they've got one hoof in the grave and the other on a banana peel, Hank," Higgins hollered, playing to the crowd. "I bid 50 cents a pound, purely for dog food." The crowd roared. Bea felt a hot flush of anger. Elias Cleary had been a strange, isolated old man who lived deep in the coastal mountains, but he had loved his animals. These cows weren't diseased. They were starved, terrified, and totally unsuited for the modern dairy industry. "Do I hear 500 for the lot?" Hank asked, clearly wanting to get the ugly beasts out of his ring. 400? Come on, the meat packer's got to want the hides at least. The packer from Portland shook his head, refusing to even raise a finger. "Too bony. Grinder'll choke on 'em," he muttered. Bea stared at the lead cow, the one with the chipped horn. The animal stopped pacing, turned its massive, misshapen head, and locked eyes with Bea. There was a fierce, unbroken wildness in those dark eyes. They weren't broken. They were survivors. Before her brain could process the financial suicide she was about to commit, Bea's hand shot up, raising her bright yellow bidding paddle. The auction house went dead silent. Even the auctioneer stopped mid-breath. "B," Hank said, leaning over the podium, dropping his auctioneer cadence. You bidding on lot 42? $312, B said, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. It was exactly the amount she had calculated she could spare without defaulting on the week's feed delivery. Higgins whipped around, his face turning red with suppressed amusement. "Gallagher, you finally lost your mind. Those things aren't dairy cows. They're gargoyles. You put a milker on them, they'll kick your teeth down your throat." 312, B repeated, ignoring him, her eyes locked on Hank. "Going once," Hank said softly. "Going twice. Sold to Beatrice Gallagher." The gavel cracked. The laughter that followed was deafening. It wasn't just Higgins. It was the whole town. They were laughing at the desperate, failing dairy girl who had just spent her last lifeline on a circus freak show of livestock. Loading them onto her rusty gooseneck trailer took 2 hours and a lot of swearing. The cows were incredibly agile, jumping over barriers with an athleticism standard dairy cows couldn't dream of. By the time B pulled out of the parking lot, the rain had started to fall, and the heavy weight of what she had just done settled into her chest. She had 24 hideous, wild cows. She had no money, and winter was coming. When B pulled the trailer into Oakhaven Dairy, her foreman, Dale, was waiting in the driving Oregon rain. Dale had worked for B's grandfather. He was 65, possessed a permanent scowl, and knew cattle better than he knew his own children. He walked to the back of the trailer, peered through the metal slats, and went completely pale. "B," Dale rasped, wiping rain from his weathered face. "Tell me you're hiding the actual cows behind these chupacabras." "They're heritage breeds, Dale," B said defensively, stepping out into the mud. "They just need some feed and a little care." "They need an exorcism," Dale shot back as the lead cow, the one B had mentally named Gargoyle, let out a bellow that sounded more like a dinosaur than a bovine. The winter of 2024 hit the Tillamook Valley with a vengeance. Ice storms battered the coast, knocking out power and freezing the water troughs solid. It was a miserable, grueling season that pushed Oakhaven Dairy to the brink of collapse. B's remaining Holsteins, fragile and bred strictly for climate-controlled comfort, suffered terribly. 3 came down with severe mastitis. 2 others lost dangerous amounts of weight, despite being fed expensive grain. Bea was spending money she didn't have on veterinary bills just to keep them producing. But the Uglies, as Dale had affectionately dubbed them, were a completely different story. They didn't just survive the winter, they thrived. When the pasture was buried under 6 inches of snow, the Uglies used their heavy hooves to break the ice and forage. When the hay ran low, B watched in disbelief as Gargoyle and the others happily devoured blackberry brambles, thistles, and pine scrub that the Holsteins wouldn't even look at. They were incredibly efficient processors of low-quality forage. By March, they had put on weight. They were still incredibly ugly. Their coats grew in thick, woolly patches, and their odd, angular frames remained. But their eyes were bright, and they moved with a muscular grace. Then came spring, and with it, calving season. This was the ultimate test. If they couldn't produce milk, beer was finished. She braced herself for disaster. Modern dairy cows often needed assistance during birth, sometimes even a winch. But one crisp April morning, Bee walked into the lower pasture to find Gargoyle licking a perfectly healthy, strangely spotted calf. Over the next 2 weeks, all 24 cows calved perfectly on their own in the field. Not a single vet visit required. It was a small victory, but the real test was the milking parlor. Getting the Uglies into the mechanical stanchions was a rodeo. They hated the confinement. Gargoyle kicked a metal pipe so hard it bent. But Dale, using a patience Bayer didn't know he possessed, slowly gained their trust with molasses oats. Finally, the milking cups were attached. Bayer stood by the glass collection jar, holding her breath. The vacuum pumped. The milk began to flow. Bea frowned. She wiped the glass. "Dale, look at this." Dale walked over, squinting. "Something wrong with the pump?" "No," Bea whispered. "Look at the color." Standard milk is stark white. The liquid pumping from the Uglies was different. It was a rich, heavy cream color, with a faint, almost buttery yellow hue. It looked thick, leaving a heavy coating on the sides of the glass piping. Bea poured a sample into a testing cup and took a sip. Her eyes widened. It didn't taste like the watery skim she was used to. It was intensely rich, with a complex, earthy sweetness that coated the palate. It was incredible. Relief washed over her. She had milk. A lot of it. The herd was producing less volume than a Holstein, but the sheer density of it made up for it. She pumped the milk into her main chilling tank, mixing it with the Holstein milk, and sent the truck off to the Pacific Northwest Dairy Cooperative. 2 days later, the nightmare began. Bea was in the barn when the mail arrived. Inside was a certified letter from the co-op. "Dear Ms. Gallagher, this letter serves as a formal notice of rejection for tanker shipment number 444409. Quality assurance revealed a catastrophic deviation in your milk profile. The fat-to-protein ratio is completely out of standardized commercial parameters, and our chemical analysis detected an anomalous protein matrix that will not process correctly in our homogenization facilities. Furthermore, the yellow pigmentation indicates a potential feed contamination or unregulated breed issue. We are penalizing your account, $200 for the contaminated truck, and suspending your Grade A commercial pickup until the anomaly is rectified." Bea sank onto an overturned bucket, the paper shaking in her hands. They were rejecting it. The milk was too rich, too different. The commercial industry didn't want quality or uniqueness. They wanted uniformity. They wanted white water. Within a week, the news hit the town. Thomas Higgins made sure of it. Rumors spread at the local diner that Bea Gallagher's mutant cows had a disease that turned their milk toxic. Higgins even drove his brand-new King Ranch pickup truck down her driveway, offering to buy her land for 1/3 of its value. "Before the bank locks the gates on you, Bea." She chased him off her property with a pitchfork, but the bravado faded the moment his taillights disappeared. She was dumping hundreds of gallons of beautiful, rich milk into the manure lagoon every day because nobody would buy it. Arthur Reynolds at the bank called. "Bea, I'm sorry. The co-op suspended you. I have to file the foreclosure papers on Monday." It was Thursday. Desperate, operating on 3 hours of sleep, Bea filled 3 mason jars with the strange yellow milk from the Uglies. She didn't know what the anomalous protein matrix the co-op mentioned was, but she needed to find out. She threw the jars into a cooler, tossed it into the passenger seat of her dented Ford, and drove 3 hours to the State University Agricultural Laboratory in Corvallis. She walked into the sterile, brightly lit lab, smelling of diesel and cow manure, carrying her mason jars like they were holy relics. She practically cornered a stressed-looking graduate student named Chloe, who was running a mass spectrometer. "I need you to test this," B demanded, sliding a jar onto the counter. "I need to know exactly what is in this milk." Chloe blinked, looking at the yellow-tinted liquid. "Ma'am, we usually require a scheduled appointment and a departmental grant for— I have 48 hours before I lose my family's farm," Bea interrupted, her voice cracking, the exhaustion finally breaking through. "Please, the co-op says it's anomalous. I just need to know if it's poison, or if I'm just crazy." Chloe softened. She took the jar, opened the lid, and sniffed it. A curious look crossed her face. "Give me 3 hours." Bea remained seated on the cold hallway floor without moving, her back resting against the wall outside the laboratory. The clock above the emergency exit ticked steadily, marking every agonizing second. 3 hours and 12 minutes passed in complete silence. She never touched her phone, never stood to stretch, and barely noticed the nurses walking past. Her entire focus was fixed on the lab door, waiting for it to open. At last, the handle turned. The laboratory door swung inward, and Chloe stepped into the hallway. The confidence she had worn when she entered was gone. She no longer looked merely curious or intrigued. She looked utterly stunned, as though the test results in her hands had shattered everything she thought she knew. A stack of freshly printed chemical analyses trembled slightly between her fingers. Her eyes flicked repeatedly from the pages to Bee's face, searching for an explanation that the data simply refused to provide. After several long seconds, Chloe swallowed hard. "Where did you get this milk?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, carrying equal parts disbelief and amazement. "From my cows," Bee said, standing up, her heart pounding. "The ugly ones. Is it bad? Is it diseased?" "Diseased?" Chloe let out a breathless laugh. "Bee, do you have any idea what you have sitting in your barn?" Chloe stared down at the mass spectrometer printout, as if it held the secrets of the universe. She tapped a fingernail against a complex, jagged spike on the digital graph. "Bee," Chloe said, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. "The co-op rejected this because they're corporate cow pushers who only know how to process watery, industrialized Holstein sludge. This milk isn't contaminated. It's a holy grail." Bee gripped the edge of the metal counter. "Explain it to me in English, Chloe. Am I rich, or am I losing my farm on Monday?" "Both, if you don't play your cards right," Chloe said, spinning her laptop around. "Look at this profile. These cows aren't just random strays. They carry a pure, unadulterated genetic line of ancient Randall lineback, mixed with old-world alpine dairy cattle, strains that haven't existed commercially in the Pacific Northwest for nearly a century." Chloe pointed to specific peaks on the chart. "First, it has a 100% pure A2 beta-casein protein structure. Most modern milk is a mix of A1 and A2, which causes digestive issues for a lot of people. But that's just the start. Look at the kappa-casein levels. They are off the charts. The fat globules are micro-sized, and the solid content is nearly double standard milk." "What does that mean for cheese?" Bee asked, her breath catching. "It means," Chloe said, her eyes wide, "this milk has a natural curd-forming tension that artisan cheesemakers would literally kill for." It's liquid gold for aged cheeses. It has the exact same enzymatic profile as the milk used to make high-end Parmigiano Reggiano or traditional Gruyere. Your cows aren't broken, Bee. They're producing the most sought-after cheese-making milk in North America, and you're dumping it in a manure lagoon. The words hit Bee like a physical blow. A wave of vindication washed over her, followed immediately by pure, unadulterated terror. She had 3 days before Arthur Reynolds filed the foreclosure papers. Knowing the milk was good, didn't pay a 90-day bank arrearage. "How do I sell it?" Bee asked, her voice trembling. "The coop has me blacklisted." "You don't sell it to co-ops," Chloe said firmly, tapping away at her keyboard. "You sell it to craftsmen. Give me your phone." Before Bea could protest, Chloe snatched her cracked smartphone, typed out a frantic email, attached a photo of the lab readout, and hit send. "Who did you just email?" Bea asked. "Alistair Finch," Chloe said with a grin. "He owns Cascadia Artisan Fromagerie up in Seattle. He's won every major cheese award in the country, and he's famously obsessed with sourcing ancient, rare breed milk profiles. If anyone can save Oakhaven Dairy, it's Alistair." Bee drove back down the interstate in a daze, the rain lashing against her windshield. The lab report sat on the passenger seat like a winning lottery ticket, but reality loomed large. Seattle was 3 hours away. Alistair Finch was a culinary titan who likely received 1,000 emails a day from desperate farmers. Why would he care about a muddy, failing dairy farm in Tillamook, run by a woman everyone thought was crazy? When she pulled back into Oakhaven, the sight waiting for her nearly stopped her heart. A sleek, black SUV was parked right beside Dale's tractor. Standing by the milking barn was Thomas Higgins, accompanied by a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive wool overcoat. Arthur Reynolds, the bank manager, was holding a clipboard, pointing toward the main pasture where Gargoyle and the Uglies were grazing. Bee slammed her truck door shut and marched across the gravel, her boots kicking up mud. "What the hell are you doing on my property, Higgins?" Bee shouted, closing the distance. Higgins turned, a smug, oily smile plastered across his face. He gestured to the silver-haired man. "Bee, meet Mr. Harrison from the county zoning board. And Arthur's already told you how this ends. Since your milk truck got banned and you're 2 days away from default, I figured I'd save you the embarrassment of a public auction. I'm offering 25 cents on the dollar for the land." Arthur Reynolds looked uncomfortable, avoiding Bee's eyes. "Bee, be reasonable. Without a milk contract, you have no income. The bank has to protect its assets." Bea didn't flinch. She walked right up to Higgins, standing tall despite her mud-stained jacket. "You want Oakhaven, Thomas? You'll have to dig my grave first. My grandfather built this place, and I'm not selling an inch of it to a corporate vulture." Higgins laughed, a dry, grating sound. "Keep your pride, Gallagher. Let's see how proud you are when the sheriff padlocks your front door on Monday morning." As Higgins and Reynolds turned to walk back to their vehicle, a low, rumbling roar echoed down the gravel driveway. All 4 of them paused, turning to look. A dust-covered, high-end Mercedes van with Seattle plates came barreling down the road, kicking up gravel, and slammed to a halt right behind Higgins's luxury SUV, blocking him in completely. The side door slid open with a sharp whack. A man with wild, untamed grey hair, wearing a flour-dusted chef's apron over a cashmere sweater, hopped out. He looked like a mad scientist who had just escaped from a kitchen. "Which one of you is Beatrice Gallagher?" The man barked, his voice cutting through the damp air. Bea blinked. I am. Who's asking? The man ignored her, marching straight past Higgins, grabbing a small metal cooler from the back of his van and pulling out a glass jar. He unscrewed the lid, dipped his finger into the yellow-tinted milk, and brought it to his tongue. He closed his eyes. For 3 agonizing seconds, nobody breathed. Then Alistair Finch opened his eyes, and they were wide with pure, unadulterated reverence. Incredible, Alistair whispered, staring at the jar as if it held the secrets of the cosmos. He turned his piercing gaze onto Bea. Where in God's green earth? Did you get kappa-casein ratios like this? This is pre-industrial genetics. This is liquid velvet. Thomas Higgins stepped forward, frowning. Hold on. Who the hell are you, mister? This is private property. This farm is about to be foreclosed on by the bank, so if you're looking to buy milk, you need to talk to— Shut up! Alistair snapped without even looking at Higgins, his eyes fixed entirely on Bea. Are you Beatrice? Yes, Bea said, standing a little taller. My name is Alistair Finch, the chef said, extending a flour-dusted hand. Your graduate student friend, Chloe, sent me your lab essays at 2 in the morning. I cancelled my morning flights, drove 3 hours through a damn storm, and nearly wrecked my van getting here. I want an exclusive contract for every single drop of milk these cows produce. Arthur Reynolds's jaw dropped. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at Alistair. Wait, Mr. Finch? The Alistair Finch from Cascadia Fromagerie. The very same, Alistair said coldly. And from the look of this bank manager holding a clipboard, you must be the bureaucratic parasite trying to steal her land. Higgins's face flushed a deep, mottled purple. Now see here, mister. No, you see here, Alistair interrupted, turning to face Higgins and Reynolds fully. He pulled a checkbook from his apron pocket. Bea, what is your total arrearage with the bank? Principal, interest, and penalties down to the last cent. Bea swallowed hard, glancing at Arthur. $14,500. Alistair didn't hesitate. He pulled out a gold pen, scribbled furiously across the check, ripped it out, and handed it directly to Arthur Reynolds. Here is a certified bank draft for $20,000, Alistair said smoothly. That covers her debt in full, with a $5,000 advance on her first month's milk supply. Deposit it immediately, mark her account current, and get off her property before I have you both cited for trespassing. Arthur stared at the check, his hands trembling. He looked at Higgins, then back at Bea. Without saying a word, the bank manager turned on his heel, got into his car, and drove away, leaving Higgins sputtering in the dust. Higgins glared at Bea, his voice venomous. You got lucky, Gallagher, but you can't run a dairy with 20 ugly mutts. You're a joke. The only joke around here, Thomas, is thinking you can bully a Gallagher, Bea said coldly. Now move your SUV. You're blocking my driveway. Higgins slammed his truck door, threw it into reverse, and tore down the gravel road, spraying mud everywhere. Silence descended on Oakhaven Dairy, broken only by the gentle chewing of gargoyle and the uglies in the pasture. Bea looked down at Alistair Finch, the sheer weight of the past 6 months finally lifting from her shoulders. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought hard to keep them back. Mr. Finch, Bea began, her voice cracking. I don't even know what to say. Don't say a word, my dear, Alistair smiled warmly, clapping a hand on her shoulder. Just show me your barn. I want to meet the artists who make this magic. 3 months later, the Tillamook County Livestock Auction House was packed to capacity. Word had spread like wildfire across the Pacific Northwest. Cascadia Fromagerie had released a limited batch Alpine cheese called Oak Haven Reserve, aged in caves and selling for $45 a pound. Food critics from New York and San Francisco were flying into Portland just to taste it. Hank Mitchell stood at the podium, clearing his throat nervously. Seated in the front row, wearing a brand-new barn jacket and boots polished to a shine, was Beatrice Gallagher. Behind her sat Dale, wearing a rare, genuine grin. "All right, folks," Hank announced into the microphone, his voice echoing off the metal rafters. "Next lot up. Well, we don't have any uglies today, but we do have 6 elite heifer calves sired by Ms. Gallagher's famous heritage herd." The bidding war was immediate, fierce, and brutal. Thomas Higgins was sitting in the back row, his arms crossed, refusing to raise a paddle as dairy farmers from 3 states fought tooth and nail for a piece of Oak Haven's genetics. When the final gavel fell, selling a single 6-month-old calf for $12,000, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause, not mocking laughter this time, but deep, genuine respect. Bea looked out over the auction ring, then turned her gaze toward the coastal hills where Oak Haven Dairy sat. Her grandfather's land was safe. The monsters in her barn had turned out to be saviors. And as she smiled up at the crowd, Bea knew one thing for certain: never judge a cow by its cover. From the brink of total ruin to the pinnacle of artisan success, Bea Gallagher's journey proves that true value is often found where others refuse to look. If this story of grit, resilience, and sweet redemption inspired you, hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves a good underdog victory, and subscribe for more unforgettable real-life dramas.